In this episode, we're going to use Pact to test our HTTP producer. Hi, I'm Mark Bradley, and welcome to Testing All the Things, a screencast in which we use live coding to demonstrate different types of testing tools and techniques. In this video, we're going to take the Pact file we created previously and use it to test the book API we created in the last few weeks. Let's look at the code. In this video, we will take the Pact file we created and use it to test the contract against our book API. Before we started recording, I made some changes to the code. I copied the Pact file that we created in the last video over into this code base for our book API, which defines how our response should look. I've also made a small change to the Docker file to install Pact on the Docker container when we run it in test mode. Let's now start adding a test to run our Pact file against our API. I'm going to put the Pact test under our end-to-end test suite here. I'm going to create a new file. We'll call it Pact test. Put it into the test module, which should be the same as all the others. Correct. And we'll create a new testify suite. Pact. And now we need to create our Pact test. We can call the test Pact now. The first thing we need to do is to produce an instance of Pact here in our test. So Pact new dsl.pact, and we'll need to include the import for this. We'll just paste this in like so, and then just we will do go mod tidy also just bring it into our vendor directory so that the IDE can find the code. Now that that's all installed, we need to start configuring Pact. Pact needs to know the name of this provider. It needs to match the provider here, so it's the book API. So we are saying we are the provider book API. We can now ask Pact to start verifying our requests. We're going to use the function verify provider. The first argument this takes is a testing t. So we can provide that from our suite. s.t provides a pointer to testing t. There we are. And now the second thing we need to do is set up our verify request. So this is verify request. And we need to provide some things. The first one we're going to provide is the base URL. This is the location that Pact will call to verify its contracts. It is the URL that your application is running on. And this application is running on Docker, so we're going to use localhost. And the port we're on is 8080. Let's bring this down to a new line because there's going to be a few more things to set up. And add the missing comma here, and then we'll need one there. Okay. So this is telling Pact which URL to hit, and now we need to tell it which Pact files to run. You'll find that by saying Pact URLs. And we're going to provide it with one Pact file, which is, so I think it will be, when it runs, it's /service/pact/ and then it is, let's just copy and paste this, get it right, and the name of our Pact file, like so. So this is the location where the Pact file will be on our Docker server. We're also going to tell Pact which version of our provider we are running. So this is the first version, so we'll just make it 1.0.0. Now we're not doing anything with this error, so we want to just check that no errors occur when we verify. And this is our Pact test hopefully set up. What we'll do now is we'll run the test and make sure that it fails, and it kind of fails in a way we expect and we've not missed something in our configuration. So let's get on to doing that. So make test, let's make this a bit bigger. Run it. Our tests have finished and they have failed. Let's go and look at why they've failed. We've got a lot of output here. It's not very readable. But here we go. So here we are. We've got some actual output from Pact saying that our verifications aren't working. So let's get to the top of them, see what we've got. So it looks like for both cases we have some issues with the checking of the content. The content seems to be the same, but it's not matching it for some reason. So that's for the 200 case and the 404 case. This error is occurring because our response is not telling us the content type it's returning, and this is causing some confusion for Pact. So if we do this, make this change, it should fix it. But what I've noticed is that it is finding a book, which suggests the book is being created and not removed by the previous tests. So let's go and fix this in our code and see if we can get these tests to pass. If we look at our REST book handler, we can see that at no point do we tell the response writer the type of content it's returning. Let's add this here at the top of our controller, because we want to catch when it returns the book, but we also want to catch when it returns errors as well. w.header.add content-type, and we are returning application JSON. It should all be lowercase. Let's rerun our tests and see if that fixes our problems with Pact. Okay, and our Pact tests are now back to passing. So our code is verifying the response of our 404 and the response of our 200 when the book is available. Now these just passed, and the reason they passed was because my existing end-to-end test happens to create a book with the same ISBN as the book our Pact file is expecting on the 200 request. What I should have done in my end-to-end tests was clean up the database before every test was run, and I should do that here as well. So we're going to go quickly and add that functionality to our end-to-end and to this Pact test. So we never created a setup for this set of tests, so we'll quickly do that now. Okay. So for this, what we can do is we can make the database a variable, db, so pointer to db, var db is a pointer to sql.db. There we go. And we can take this setup and then move it into our setup here. It's now not new. It's going to set it to that variable. So that's all set up, and the database will just have a connection here when it gets into this test. But what we want to do is we want to clear down that database. So we will, just before any test runs, we will make a connection to the database, and then we will execute and we'll just make it nice and simple, truncate and we want to truncate, I think the table is called book, yeah. So this just guarantees that every time we run an end-to-end test in this suite, at least, the database is completely blank. So even if we changed our 404 test to be the same ISBN as our 200 test, it would work, because at the case when the 404 test is being run, the book doesn't exist. And then when this case here is being run, the book has just been added and we get it back. Now we've added that here, what we'll do is we'll also add the same setup to our Pact file. So we'll take the same setup, go to our Pact tests, and make it on our Pact suite. Okay. So now before we run the Pact test as well, we make a connection to the database and we truncate the book table. Now let's run our tests. Hopefully our end-to-end tests will continue to pass, but we will now see a new failure in our Pact suite. Our tests are finished and they're back to a failing state again. Let's have a look at what happened. This time something different has happened. If we look, so our 404 case in our Pact file is still passing because it's trying to get a book, it doesn't get the book, it gets a 404 response, and it gets the response format that it expects. But our 200 response, where the book should be available, is failing. We need to ensure that there's a book for it to get, because we're expecting a 200 and we're getting a 404. Now if we look a little further down in the code, we'll see another error. If we look here, we've got a warning that the provider state for book with ISBN exists. There's nothing specified for that. Now if we go back and look at our Pact file, our Pact file provided us with a provider state. We said a book exists. And Pact allows us to hook into this in the same way we've just done with a setup. It allows us to set up functions that enable us to do things before Pact runs its tests. Let's have a look at that. So we have state handlers. That's state handlers, like so. And this is a string and mapped function that returns an error. Okay. And now we can take a book with ISBN. Here exists. Put this in here. Now this function gets called by Pact before it runs any tests that have defined this string in its state handlers. So we only have one test for that 200 response. So just before it verifies the contract, this function will be run. And in this function, we want to set up our database so that it has a book with the ISBN suggested. Our function first return an error, so we'll just return nil for now. And now let's go and grab some code from our end-to-end test. And we can come and just grab this line here, paste it in. So what we can do is we can say, don't really care about the result, we do care about errors, and then we can return this error. Hopefully all of our end-to-end tests and our Pact tests will all pass at this point, because when we need something to be in the database, it's there. We've done it in our end-to-end tests, and now here we're using state handlers from Pact to do it before it runs its verification of the 200 state contract. So let's try rerunning our tests again. And our tests are all passing again. Our state handler is working. Now let's go back and play with Pact. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to take my end-to-end tests. I'm going to skip our end-to-end test that tests our 200 state. So s.t skip. Just say Pact demo. Okay. So you want to I'm going to skip this because I don't want this test to start failing whilst I'm showing you some features of Pact. What I'm also going to do is change my make file setup for my test. Instead of running all the tests, I'm just going to run the end-to-end tests. All the tests in this folder. Now what we want to do, obviously our Pact test is all passing because when we were creating it, we created it for the interface of our API that we'd already defined. So if we go back to our end-to-end test, so we created it knowing that it returned an ISBN, title, image, genre, and year published. And those are the things we checked in our contract. But as the creator of this provider, I want to be adding more functionality to it. I want to be adding more data that it can return. And I want to be able to do that without breaking consumers. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a new field very quickly to our response. We're not going to test drive it out because we just want to see what Pact does. We don't want to go through the kind of test driven stuff. So we're just going to skip straight to adding a new field to our book that gets rendered in the JSON, and we'll just hard code it in the database layer. So get book, returns a book. So, okay. Here is our book. So what we can do is we can add a new field, and we can add the field author. Now, this will be a string. It returns JSON, author, perfect. So now we've got a new field that's being returned. Let's just quickly go to our DB layer, and we can do b.author is Mark Bradley. There we go. I can write all the books. So now our API will respond with an additional field, which is author Mark Bradley. Now if we go and run our tests, our previous end-to-end test that was very strict to its response would at this point fail because it would not be expecting an author field to be returned. But hopefully our Pact tests should continue to pass. Its contract is only interested in the bits that our consumers tell it about. So a new field will not break the Pact tests because adding a new field would not break our consumer. So let's run those tests and see. Our tests are finished and they're passing. The change we made to our response to add this author field has worked. So now let's make a change to our book. Let's say I've made the assumption that people are not using our year published field. So I want to modify this. I'm going to change it to just published. And let's now run our tests and see what Pact does. Our tests fail. And why do they fail? Because it's missing the field year published. Can't find it, the tests have failed again. So this is one of the things I really like about Pact, is it enables you to, as a provider of an API, iterate on your API, adding functionality to it, and ensuring that you're not going to break the existing journey for your clients as you add features. If you decide to deprecate or make a mistake and change the response in some way to within a field that's being used by one of your consumers, your test will fail. That's all we're going to look at in today's video. We've looked at how we can set up and run Pact tests from a Pact file that we took from the code of our client code, our consumer code. This works well when I was writing the consumer and the provider code. I had access to both code bases, so I could just copy and paste the Pact file between them, which worked for today's demo. But that's not how things are in real life. And in the next video, we'll look at Pact brokers and Pact flow as a way of sharing Pact files and how we can use those to verify and keep up to date without having to copy and paste files about. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching this episode of Testing All the Things. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please rate and review the video and subscribe to the channel. If you did not and you have any feedback, please leave a comment in the comment section of the video or contact me on Twitter @Bradle.